Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. The last time I published a video on making a new backplate for a 6-inch chuck for this lathe. Well, we got finished with the machining of the back of the backplate. Now that I have it mounted on the spindle directly, it's time to go ahead and do all the finish machining for the front of it. Well, the first thing I need to do is clean up this face. I believe this was just rough sawn. It was the way that I got it. So I just want to take it down so it is flat and perpendicular with the spindle. If you watched the last video, you know I struggled with trying to find the optimal feed rate, speed of the lathe, depth of cut, etc. in order to get a reasonably decent chip and a good finish. And also without bogging down the lathe or having any crashes. Well, unfortunately, I chipped that insert, and I don't have any more that are just like it. At least I couldn't find any. I might have to look in another drawer. So I have this other coating on this insert, same geometry. It's still a CCMT, I believe is the designation. So hopefully this one will give me the same kind of chips. Well, unfortunately, it looks like I'm back to making steel wool. And if I can't solve this, it's really going to suck. Well, I'm going to try something completely different. I have these right-hand TNGG inserts. So I've got to set the tool post here at a funky angle and also machine this from the inside out. I'm kind of hoping maybe I can get a little better depth of cut. Maybe it'll break a chip. We'll see what this one does. Well, it started off really promising at the center, which has a slower surface feet per minute. And as the tool makes its way to the outer extremes of the part, even though the RPM is the same, the surface feet per minute increases. And I don't think the geometry of this tool is really designed for that, at least not for this particular material. So I am going to try slowing down the lathe and see if by slowing down the RPM I can get a better surface feet per minute on the outside diameter. Well, that did marginally better. It didn't start going all stringy until it got a little further out from the center. So I could run this thing a little bit slower. I think I might experiment with that, but I'm not going to bore you with this because this is going to take hours, I think, at this rate just to rough this in. I have to take about 400 thousandths off of the front of this to begin with, and then I have to machine down the outside, leaving about 3 inches of essentially a nose, what's left in the front of it around the spindle. So I'm going to take some time to do that alone and off camera, and I will bring you back when I get this a little closer to the finished size.
One eternity later.
Well, it may have only been a couple of seconds for you, but it has literally been days for me. Now, mind you, I wasn't sitting next to this lathe operating dials and wheels for that long, but it has taken me that long. It's been just an hour here or an hour there throughout the day and in the evenings. And that's mostly because I have to work a regular job. I don't get to spend all day out here as much as I would love to do that. I really only have time on the weekends and in the evenings. And when I can only take a depth of cut of maybe 15 thousandths at a time before this lathe starts to bog down, or the motor gets too warm, I have to walk away after about 45 minutes to an hour each time. So I walk away, I let everything cool off, and then I come back. And a watchful eye might notice that the front of this has quite a bit of it removed. You can actually see the spindle in the center here, and I've got the majority of everything roughed in. So at this point I'm trying to finish the nose of the backplate here down to about 3 inches, 110 to 105 thousandths. Well, it might be a little difficult to read there, but we're getting 3 inches, 174 thousandths or so. So we are still about 65, 70 thousandths away from our target. I don't want to take this down all the way to my finish dimension. I want to leave about 25 thousandths or so for some cleanup passes. So just a little bit more off the diameter and we'll be close enough to start machining the face of the back plate. I think we're close enough. I don't want to go any further until I get the face cleaned up. 25. Well, due to the nature of the roughing passes, this face is kind of stair-stepped. So I've got a different insert in here now. This is a TNMG insert in a right-hand holder, and I'm hoping that it's a little more stout. Maybe it's got a different chip breaker on it. Maybe I'll get a little better action out of this one. We'll see. Well, it looks like this one is making stringy chips too, so I'll bring you back when I have a little more progress to show. And this is why I hate those stringy chips. I was paying more attention to not crashing the machine when I didn't notice that this long bundle of chips has wrapped itself around the lead screw. I'm glad I noticed it when I did, because if it had gotten into the worm wheel and in that area, this could have been just a complete and total disaster. Well, we're getting closer to my finished size here, so I want to take a quick measurement of this nose just to see where I'm at. Looks like 3 inches, 119 thousandths, so still a little bit to go. I think we can probably finish that off here in a single pass. Okay, that's exactly what I was looking for. I just want some side-to-side play so I can use those set screws to adjust it so it's truly centered. Well, we only have a couple of quick operations to do. One is to use the TNGG insert here to provide a little bit of undercut in that corner just to be sure, and then also to clean up the face of the backplate here. I'm going to swap tools here now so I can break a few of these edges. Well, there was an operation I forgot to do here, so I've got the TNGG insert back in here. I need to provide some relief between the nose here of the backplate and where the front of the chuck mounts to it. So there's going to be a space of about 3/4 of an inch on the circumference, which will be proud, and then it's going to be relieved from the nose to that spot. This dimension is not critical, but I do want to drop it by about 5/1000ths of an inch. Now I did notice there looks to be like a burr on the ID here of the backplate. What I want to do here is fix that here on the lathe, but I don't want to get a cutting tool that close to the spindle. So the first thing I need to do is just loosen this back plate, and I'm going to need to use this strap clamp to get it off because there's no way for me to grip it, and it is on there tight after all these turning operations. Well, I couldn't get the camera over here for you to see what I'm doing anyway, but basically I'm taking some emery cloth here and folding it up a couple of times, and I'm just jamming it behind the back plate. So it's in between the back plate and the shoulder on the spindle. And that should space this away from the spindle enough that I can get a cutting tool in here and get rid of that burr. I don't want to be too aggressive here. I just want to come in nice and easy. I want to be careful not to nick the spindle nose. More than likely it would just scratch it lightly and end up breaking the insert anyway, but I don't want to do any irreparable harm to it if I can avoid it. So I just want to come in here, take off that burr, and I think if there's anything left, we can fix that with a file. I will say that, I might be biased, but this thing looks absolutely beautiful. I hated machining it, but the end result I really can't argue with. I still have a little bit more work to do, and we'll get to that here next. I did want to show, though, what all those hours and hours of machining steel wool looks like. All of this junk that's on the top is from this particular project. At least most of it. There might be a little bit in here that's from something else. And that's not even including this junk here, which is what I just took out of the lathe. This is, probably half the weight of my original stock, and none of it broke as decent chips. I'm going to take this stuff to the recycler only because I really don't want to throw this stuff just in a landfill or in the garbage. I'm not going to get any money for it, but, I'd rather it be recycled than just end up in the dirt. Well, I'm not really one to brag on myself, but man, does this thing really look good. I guess I'm just, I don't know, overwhelmed that I was actually able to make something that looks this nice. You know, my dad used to say even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again. It pretty much came out right on dimension, on size. I couldn't really ask for it to have come out any better. And if I compare it to the original, it kind of looks the same, you know, from feature to feature outside of the size of the threaded center. And of course, the one that I'm working on still needs some mounting holes for the chuck. So let's go ahead and take care of that next. I actually struggled a little bit with how I wanted to hold this thing in the vise. I wanted to use a V-block, but I don't have one that would fit in here. I needed one that would be shallow, and I don't. And it would need to be, you know, not very tall, and I don't have one of those either. So we're going to just try to set this on a couple of parallels. I've got some steel shims here that I'm going to put behind the jaws here just to keep from doing any serious damage to the nose of the back plate. I'm going to use the PCD function on my DRO, but the first thing I need to do is find the center of this hole. I thought about bringing out the coaxial indicator, but instead I think just doing an XY edge find, and it's going to get me the same results. With my XY0 set, I need to now find the PCD function inside the DRO. Here it is, and it's just as simple as scrolling down through the settings. I know my diameter is 5.34 inches. I just measured that with some calipers. And we have 6 holes. And I'm just going to start the angle at 0. My end angle will be 0. And I just need to press the start button, F5 here, and that will tell me where my first hole is. Now the red dot represents where the spindle currently is. The orange dot, or yellow, whichever color you think that might be, is where I want it to be in order to drill that hole. So I just need to take the X and Y to 0 here on this display, and it puts me exactly over where it calculated this hole should be. I'm going to go around and spot drill all these locations first. Did you see that? Did you see the part move? Well, I didn't when I spotted this first hole. I didn't notice it until I got around to the third location. Oh, that's not good. No, that is definitely not good. Apparently I didn't have this very well seated on the parallels. So now I'm hoping I can loosen the vise here just enough to seat this and then to tighten it up without losing position, because I don't want to go back and have to deal with respotting these holes. Well, the other thing I'm going to do is go get a couple of machinist jacks and put them under the left and right sides just as a little extra added insurance. Well, I couldn't actually fit a machinist jack underneath here because none of the ones I have are short enough. So I do have a couple of risers that are for one of my jacks. I've got those under each side, and then I've got some shim material on top of that, and that's wedged it just enough to where I don't have any kind of motion now. I am going to put my hand on this though each time I drill, just to be sure. I'm going back and checking my previous spots just to be sure nothing has moved, and if it hasn't, then I should be good to go and complete this. Well, before I drill this second hole, which is right over top of these vice jaws, I only have maybe 150 thousandths between the part and the jaws. I'm going to set my quill stop that will prevent this drill from getting too far and getting too close. It'll drill all the way through, but it won't be able to nick the vice jaws. I am using anchor lube here as a coolant slash lubricant for this operation. I've been using this stuff for years, long before anchor lube was a supporter of the channel. If you'd like to give anchor lube a try, there is a link down in the description on where you can get some from their Amazon store. With all of the holes drilled, I'm going around now and chamfering these holes. I am setting the quill stop again so that I get a consistent chamfer all the way around. Well, this is the last operation I need to do on this backplate, and it's the one that I've been dreading the most. I had such a hard time machining this that the idea of breaking a tap in one of these holes just makes my stomach go blah. So I'm trying to take every precaution that I can. I'm using a 1-to-1 mixture of Anchor Lube and Tap Magic. This was recommended to me by somebody else. I figure it probably can't hurt. I'll give it a try. And I'm using a spiral flute tap. Now, I've had really good luck with this particular tap before, but man, is it really feeling tight, and I am just so afraid that I'm going to break this thing off. I'm being extra careful. Well, I did not like how that was feeling, so I'm just switching over to a traditional plug tap. This is a relatively new tap. I've only used it a couple of times. Does mean I'm going to have to back off and break chips, which again still kind of scares me, but we'll see how this goes. Nope, don't like how this feels either. This is coming out, and I've got one other option. Well, the last option I have here is a split point tap. I've actually never tried one of these before, so we'll see how this goes. Well, this is actually cutting the threads much easier than the other two. I've got a piece of tape here underneath the backplate, just again, so I don't run this tap all the way through and end up hitting the top of the vice jaws, which would likely probably break the tap. Well, that actually went really, really well. I don't think that could have gone any better from my perspective, at least. I don't know if these taps are still available or if they're expensive or not, but I think this is going to be my go-to tap from now on. Well, the real last operation here is just to deburr and chamfer the other side of these threaded holes. Well, it's time now to put this thing back together once and for all. I did my best getting it all cleaned up. Well, the first thing I want to do is just apply just a light coating of grease here on the scroll where the chuck jaws ride. We'll do the same thing here to the rack that's on the back of the scroll. I'm going to be a little bit more liberal here with the grease. And the pinion gets the same treatment. I'm putting a light layer of grease on all the mating surfaces. Normally I would use oil, but this grease is sitting next to me, and I'll wipe most of this off before I actually assemble everything. With the pinion here in place inside the back half of the chuck, I can set this now on top of the front half and line up the mounting holes. And then I have these 6 socketed cap screws that join the two halves of the chuck together. I'll put a little bit of torque on these here with the impact driver, but I think when I get it on the lathe and I can lock the chuck in back here, I'll tighten these up a little bit more for its final time there. I'll put a little bit more grease here on the sliding areas here on the sides of each of the chuck jaws before I put them in, making sure that I start with the one stamped 1 and work my way around the chuck, making sure I keep every one of these in its right order. Well, all the jaws still come together the way they're supposed to. So that's a good sign that I didn't screw anything up putting it back together. Well, and now it's time for the star of the show here. Again, with a little bit of grease on the mating surfaces, just very lightly. I can set the back plate in position and then use these longer socket head cap screws to attach it to the chuck. And then for the true adjust, or I'm not sure what Buck calls this, Accu set, something or other, there are these shoes here. There's 4 of them. 4 shoes, and then these set screws that compress them against the nose of the back plate, allowing you to adjust the concentricity of the chuck much like you would a 4-jaw chuck. With the chuck assembled and everything cleaned off here, I can get this chuck now mounted on the lathe and see how I did. Well, it didn't immediately fly off or fly apart, so I'll call that at least the initial win. I have a piece of ground rod here I'll tighten up in the chuck, and we'll get a dial indicator on it to see how concentric it is and then adjust it from there. Well, it looks like it's off by about 5 or 10 thousandths. So the first thing I need to do is loosen up all of the mounting screws just enough just to make them snug so that I can adjust the set screws. Now I just need to adjust these set screws, loosening some, tightening others until I push this chuck till it's concentric with the spindle. Well, I got really close with a thousandths indicator. Let's put a half thou indicator in here and see if we need to make any other adjustments. Well, I'm not seeing any movement in this dial at all, so I don't know if I got really lucky or is this thing not touching. Let's do a quick adjustment here, see if I get it back on 0. No, I'd say that thing is running really true. Well, let me try a different pin here. This is a ground pin. It's an old one. It's kind of beat up. I don't really expect it to necessarily be in too great a condition, but at least we can get an idea if this thing is, you know, just as close with a slightly larger piece of material. Well, that's still within maybe a half a thou to a thou, and quite frankly, for any chuck, that's probably really good, at least outside of a collet chuck. I might tweak this a little bit more, see if I can't get a little bit closer, but for now I'm going to call this done. But I think for now I'm going to use it as it is. I'll just need to tighten up these bolts on the front of the chuck just to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere. And I think we're going to be good to go. I'm really happy with not only how well the chuck cleaned up and with the back plate, but that I was able to adjust it and at least get it within a thousandth of an inch. Well, that's going to be it then for this video and for this project. And I really didn't think it was going to take this much effort to make a back plate, but it really, really did try my patience, as well as maybe push a few envelopes. But I think this is going to be my new favorite chuck to use. I don't know, do people have favorite chucks? They must, because this is now my new favorite chuck. It's only 6 inches, so it's limited in the size that I can turn things on with this lathe, being that the lathe is a 13-inch swing. But maybe one of these days I'll find a nice 8-inch or maybe even a 10-inch 6-jaw, because having a 6-jaw just seems to be, so advantageous over a 3-jaw chuck for sure. Now I do have a 3-jaw chuck for the newer lathe, and it is also a true adjust. So I'll be curious to see how concentric that is, or repeatable, if I can pull something out and put it back in and it remain concentric to the spindle. Well, and as always, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does mean a lot. And if you're not subscribing, hit that subscribe button. Subscribing is free. It costs you nothing. And if you hit that bell icon, you'll know when I release a new video. And I can't express enough gratitude to those viewers that have opted to support the channel in other ways by contributing either via PayPal or become members on Patreon. I can't wait to put this chuck to use on a real project. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.